Okay, this is a character overview of Sheila in An Inspector Calls. So just giving you some key quotations about her character and her character's journey really across the play, the three acts of the play. And as a heading I've written innocence and experience because the journey that Sheila's character goes on during the play is one from innocence to experience at the end, and she is one of the more sympathetic characters by the end of the play, and certainly someone Priestley wants us to identify with and feel sympathy for. So in Act 1, the first quote I've put down next to the image of the engagement ring, which is obviously an important symbol which she offers to give back to Gerald, doesn't she, later on in the play. But when she's first given it, she says, "Excited, oh Gerald, you've got it. Is it the one you wanted me to have?" Now, really important piece of dialogue in suggesting how submissive and I suppose stereotypically female of the period Sheila is. She's excited by marriage. She's excited by this symbol of wealth and prosperity. It's a material object, an expensive engagement ring, and she's excited by the fact that it's the one Gerald had picked out. So the dialogue is emphasising not only Sheila's innocence but also her submissiveness and her naivety, I suppose. She's excited by the prospect of marriage, she's excited by wealth, and she's happy to be dominated by male figures in society. In this case, Gerald. He's the one who's in control of her, and the ring symbolises male ownership of women at the time that the play is set, and indeed at the time, although things were beginning to change when the play was written in 1945. The second quote from page 6 is, "I'm sorry, Daddy, I was listening," which again shows her submissiveness in Act 1, the beginning of Act 1, this time to Burling, her father. The fact that she calls him Daddy suggests her lack of independence, her submissiveness again, and the sense that she is ignored or patronised by male figures in society. He expects her not to have been listening because she's a frivolous, silly young woman, but she's stating that she was listening. So it shows her, I suppose, hidden independent spirit there. But the two sentences linked together suggest that she doesn't really have an independent voice. She apologises to her father. So again, she's showing her lack of power. By page 16, we're already noticing, with the inspector's influence on the play and her character, that she's beginning to change slightly. She's challenging the ideas that her father seems to be putting forward about responsibility or lack of responsibility for the working class, and she states, "But these girls aren't cheap labour, they are people," which is an explicitly socialist view and Priestley's view really about the working class. So she's showing that she has some understanding of what the inspector is stating, and that she can identify with people from a different and lower social class than her, even though she's been brought up perhaps to ignore them. So it's showing that she has an innate humanity about her, and with the inspector's encouragement she starts to realise and voice that sense of humanity that perhaps her father ignores. By page 23, she's stating, after the inspector's interrogation of her about Eva Smith, she takes responsibility immediately for what she did at Millward's, the complaint that she raised against the girl. She shows her guilt and her sense of responsibility. It was my own fault. So she doesn't try and blame anybody else like her father does. So she contrasts with Burling immediately in the first act by actually showing that she's willing to take some responsibility for her role in Eva Smith's downfall and death. So already in Act 1 we're seeing a transformation of her character. She's starting to show that she's different to most of the other members of the family. In Act 2, again, page 29, she again reasserts this sense that she knows she did something wrong and she has some responsibility. I know I'm to blame. Blame is a very emotive and important word in the play, and it links to that sense of sharing responsibility for what happens in society and not just offloading it because you've got a pleasant and comfortable life. By page 30, she's starting to transform, I suppose, into a spokeswoman for the inspector. She seems to side with the inspector, and a very important image she creates when talking to her mother, who's been questioned by the inspector and being quite rude and confrontational and resisting the inspector. She says, you mustn't try to build up a kind of wall between us and this girl. And that image of the wall, she realises the inspector is here to break that wall down between the upper class and the lower class, and she sees it's pointless to try and build that wall up again. When Priestley was writing this play in 45, there was a sense that he feared that symbolic wall would be built up again, and that the higher classes would start to ignore the lower classes who just suffered massively through the Second World War. And Priestley, as a dramatist, is kind of urging people not to build up barriers between social classes again. There's got to be a sense of social levelling and more equality. By page 45, she's directly contradicting and attacking her own parents. So contrasting with Act 1, where she's very submissive towards her parents, she says, Mother, I think that was cruel and vile. So that rather emotive language, which is the kind of language the inspector uses, she's beginning to challenge her parents here and showing that she has a moral conscience and she can judge her parents. She has some independent thought. By Act 3, page 58, when the other characters, Gerald, Mr. Burling, Mrs. Burling, start to discover that the inspector may have been a fake or not who he said he was, and they start to feel a huge amount of relief, even when Sheila is confronted by the fact that perhaps there wasn't one single girl called Eva Smith. There might have been many girls, and some of the story might not have been true. She still reasserts you don't seem to have learnt anything. So Sheila comes away with a sense that the inspector was there to teach them a moral lesson. Whatever the truth of the story is, they still treated people unfairly and cruelly, and they needed to learn that lesson that what they did was wrong. So she resists the idea that everything is all right by the end of the play, and she's quite assertive about the idea that she should, and they as a family should, have learnt some kind of a lesson. By page 71, the end of the play, she is reasserting the importance of the socialist message of the play by saying whoever the inspector was, it was anything but a joke. This is not an entertaining and lovely night out at the theatre. It might have been exciting, but when you leave that theatre door, you shouldn't be giggling and laughing. You should be looking at the world, looking at the homeless people on the street that you pass, looking at the people who are doing jobs lower down the social scale in society. So Sheila is really mirroring Priestley's socialist message. And once the inspector's gone, she's the character, her and Eric, there to promote that idea that the chance for change hasn't been completely lost. So that in a nutshell, with some quick key quotations, shows the journey that Sheila goes on from a very innocent and naive young lady who is sheltered by her social class, to one who is far more socially aware and actually quite independent in her thoughts and ideas about how society perhaps should be run and what she has learnt from the experience of talking to the inspector.